everybody. Welcome to the FCA Locker Room, the show where we explore how faith and sports come together to transform lives on and off the field. I'm one of your hosts, Vincenzo Pepe. I'm joined here with a couple colleagues and friends, and we're going to have a great episode for you guys today. Typically, our episodes are more practical advice for our coaches and athletes and how to handle faith situations in the locker room or on the field. Today, we're going to give you a little bit more of a glimpse inside of the ministry of FCA, specifically here in the Northeast region, because that's where most of you guys are listening from. And we just want to share a little bit of the heart behind our mission here in the Northeast and give you guys a glimpse of kind of where FCA started in this area and where we're looking to go in the future as we look to lead every coach and athlete into a growing relationship with Jesus Christ and his church. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to my co-host, Justin, and he's going to take us away.
All right. Hi, everybody. Yes, I'm Justin Ham, and I am another one of the co-hosts for the FCA Locker Room, and we are just so excited today to have our guest, Nathan Bliss, join us. Nathan is the Regional Vice President for the Northeast Region for FCA, and he's taken some time to sit with us today and kind of share the where FCA's come and where it's going and the directions behind it. So we're just thrilled to have him here. One of the things that I wanted to do just to kind of, acquaint Nathan with the locker room is ask one of those fun questions that everybody likes to ask. So Nathan, if you had to compete in one Olympic sport, winter or summer, what would it be and why?
Wow.
You stumped him already.
Yes.
So my first thought was ping pong, but I think the fact that I even call it ping pong, not table tennis, probably disqualifies me for that. So I'm gonna go with team handball. I would go with team handball. I used to dominate with that in high school in the gym. So I probably still have it. Who knows?
Okay, so summer sport, and it would be team handball. That'd be pretty cool.
I go summer. Who wants the cold? I mean, we live in the Northeast. We're cold enough.
10 months out of the year.
Yeah. So Nathan, can you just share with our listeners and the audience just a little bit more about your background, kind of what led you to FCA and your role right now?
Yeah, my background really is part of what led me to FCA. Actually, I grew up playing sports. I had a chance to play sports in college. It was actually a coach who first shared the gospel with me, led me to Christ, invited me to a Bible study where I heard the gospel again, and gave my life to Jesus. And because I played on a sports team in college, I went in to the locker room and I told the guys that I'd become a Christian, and a couple of my close friends on the team that I didn't know it at the time, but they were also Christians. They invited me to this Bible study that they called FCA, which I thought was just a cool name for the Bible study. I had no idea it was an organization. So, let alone a ministry that you could actually work for. So years later, I found out that they were trying to hire somebody for Fellowship of Christian Athletes at Syracuse University, which is my alma mater. And really out of curiosity, I took the interview. I was really focused on church ministry, adult education, things like that. But the idea of Jesus and sports, two of my lifelong passions, out of curiosity, I went to check it out. And on the ride home, I called my wife and I said, "Listen, honey, I don't know if they'll hire me. If they don't, I'm going to volunteer, but this is what I'm supposed to do." After sitting for 30 minutes with the person that ended up hiring me for FCA back in 2011. So my background has been sports. I've been a high school coach prior to FCA. I love the influence that coaches have. I've seen what an athlete who actually worships God through a sport can do for a team, for a community. So it was a dream and then I somehow convinced them to hire me.
I love how I think I had the same kind of interaction when I was first interviewed for my position. Afterwards, like I remember hanging up and I said to Michelle, I was like, I don't know what it is about this organization, but like I need to be involved one way or the other. Like I don't really care how it is. Like I'm just gonna this is where I'm supposed to be also. And thankfully here I am with you guys as teammates. But that's awesome that you could see the impact that it had on your life just growing up and what you're able to do. I think that brings more passion to what you're able to do now is in your role.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, and you actually said something in that Nathan that I thought was really interesting. You said seeing how the impact that an athlete can worship and create. Like, how can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, I think that's a really powerful opportunity to be able to use your sport as an act of worship.
Yeah. Well, I was really, I didn't grow up in church. So the first time I opened the Bible, I was in college.
Hmm.
And I was, from the moment I opened God's word, I just fell in love with it. So we'd go in, for instance, to a team workout, and I would, I would have read a verse and I would say, okay, Lord, I'm going to do everything as unto you. What does it look like to do this next set as an act of worship? So I would actually, it was on the job training, but I was learning how to worship God through the little things, the big things. And what I noticed is that after my life changed pretty dramatically when I became a Christian. I was absolutely living for myself, very selfish. Um, my goals were my goals. I had nothing to do with God or what would benefit others. It was all about me. So when I became a Christian, my worldview changed. People noticed because I couldn't be the same person anymore. I wasn't the same person. And as I read the word and started to learn that sport, which had been my idol, and my identity was in that sport that I was playing, when I learned that God was the one that gave me the talent to play the sport, and He's the one that gave me the opportunity to play the sport. When I learned that no, He was the one that was on the throne,
Hmm.
how was I to worship Him in my life? Well, football was one of the big things in my life. So I thought if I could learn how to worship God through what up until I became a Christian was the idol of my life, then the rest of my life would follow suit. So I practiced it, and what I noticed is whether it was on a bus to a heading out to a game, I'd be reading the Word, and one person would peek over my shoulder and say, "What are you doing?" And next person would look over, and suddenly, me who's reading something for the very first time, suddenly teammates and coaches and managers are looking over my shoulder, asking me questions about this passage that I have no idea because I'm literally just reading it for the first time. But God was giving me an opportunity, and I didn't recognize it then, but He was giving me an opportunity to trust Him with the
Hmm.
things that I was doing instead of trying to have it all together and have it perfectly before I put it out there. My life was pretty much a blank slate because everybody knew I didn't know this whole Christian walk, but I wasn't going backwards.
Hmm, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
that is awesome. And how would you say your experiences shaped where you're at now in your current role?
Yeah. Well, it's everything. I mean, like I said, it was a coach who invited me to a Bible study where I gave my life to Jesus. It was teammates who invited me into FCA where I learned what it looked like to be a Christian athlete. It was coaches when I was still pretty young when I first started coaching who who would mentor me. So coaches and athletes have been in my life since I was in fourth grade. I've been in a locker room since I was in fourth grade. So when God opened the door for me to be a part of FCA, it wasn't about what's the business model that we're going to follow. It wasn't how does this company become a better company? How do we make no? This is a ministry. I wasn't interested in any way with impressing people or with making this something that some businessman or businesswoman would appreciate. This was something that needs to glorify God. So within my role at FCA, uh, I essentially say, Lord, no matter what role, Lord, if you're in it, I'm here. And as long as you anoint this, and as long as you're the one that works through me, I'm good. If you ever stop, or if this ever isn't what you want me to do, I don't want to do it anymore. So FCA for me is not a job. It's never been a job. This I really believe this is a calling. I really believe that as long as God is the one that's putting me in whatever situation He puts me in, then and we're committed to glorifying Him, then we're good.
I I think, well, actually, let me ask you this. So you started in 2011 at Syracuse, right? That's what you said.
Mhm.
And then when did you step into the role that you're at now?
This role, I stepped in March 1st, 2020.
Okay. So so obviously being on staff for a while before you stepped into that role, and now being in this role for almost 5 years, what when you first started, what did the Northeast FCA look like versus now? So obviously quite a few years later.
Yeah. What are you saying? I'm old. Yeah, no, yeah, I can barely remember when I started. No, when I first came on, FCA had organizationally had just created the Northeast region. It was created in 2010 as one of the regions in the U.S. At that point, the U.S. was the only nation that FCA was in. Uh, in the Northeast, I was number three. I was the third person on staff. So when we did something, when we did anything, it was the first time, by and large, that ministry had been done, or that local area had even heard of or experienced FCA. So when we had a camp, it was all hands on deck, and Margot might have three roles, and I might have three roles, and Dave Parks or whoever would have. We just there wasn't a deep bench, there wasn't a big team, but man, it was fun because we just had to trust God. A lot of times we felt like we were winging it. What do we do? Well, I don't know. There's no precedent here. So one, the importance of knowing that when we make a decision, that's the first time this decision's been made in this area, or this is the first time that this has been done in a given area. So we wanted to do it with excellence and have a good first impression. But on the other hand, because there was no precedent, there was no expectation from people that, hey, this is how it has to look, or this is how it's always been done. No, it's never been done. So we started with that, and we were awed by how God continued to work and how He continued to show up in places where we just never dreamed of what He would do. Fast forward, we have 65 people on staff in the Northeast. We're in over 100 countries globally within FCA. And God's grown the ministry, and for us, still a small region comparatively. We are still the smallest region in the U.S. We're lean and we're tight, but that allows us flexibility. It allows us to develop deep relationships, and in that, my prayer is that we hold true to where we started, which was we just need to trust the Lord, and we need to trust one another, and we just need to go for it. Why wait? Why shrink back? Why focus on the things that are hard? Why not just charge in? Because if God's called us to it, then it's not on us to do it. It's His promise that He's going to do it.
That's powerful. And just in listening to that and hearing just how staff has grown and how opportunities have grown, even though it's still a relatively small region, as far as like a ministry perspective, like what are some of the active ministry things that you've seen grow in the past 14 years since you started with FCA back in 2011?
Yeah, that part has been incredible. Just to see, well, campus ministry is still our bread and butter. It's still where the majority of FCA happens. It's where we see a lot of life change occur. Over 20,000 huddles in the U.S. Occurring on these campuses. We also, in addition to that, are delving into all these different ministry environments. I mean, to have a motocross camp that now every year gets families, 150 to 250 people to this FCA motocross family camp, to see all abilities grow the way it has, to see action sports, to see a skateboard ministry in Rochester, New York, to see leagues and clubs, outdoors ministry all over for all these environments to now be growing, and to have volunteers in all these areas, as opposed to just a few people on staff who are trying to do everything. Now what we're seeing is multiplication, because we have more staff, more volunteers, and more ministry areas happening. So we no longer have to feel alone in that, even though we still have a lot of areas where we need to grow. God's allowed us to branch out into all these areas, and I think we're better positioned to minister to every coach and athlete that God brings into our path. Whereas before, we had to stretch or ask them to fit into what we were doing. Now we can literally go to where they are and minister in that space.
I remember when I first came on staff, we go to Kansas City for our training, and I was sitting at a table with people from all over the country, and we were just talking about like what led us to FCA and what was our experiences. And I had never even heard of FCA prior to like 2 months before me going there.
Yeah.
And everyone there was like, "Oh yeah, my grandfather did this, and he started that, and then my dad." And so like it was like 3 or 4 generations of people that were involved with FCA in these other areas. And then here we are, me. It was just me, but like you saying for the Northeast, like you were there from the very beginning, right? And so I think in some ways, I think that's really unique and actually, yes, it can be challenging, but I see it as an opportunity for us because we can really just shape the landscape how we see fit or how God is pointing us. Because like I think you told me this, like no one knows the Hudson Valley better than I do. Nobody knows the Capital Region better than Justin, right? And so our staff are aligned, and our leadership really gives us a lot of leeway of saying like, hey, you know what your people need the most. Like, go do it that way. And I think that kind of releases some pressure and allows us to really be creative. And I think in the Northeast, we've been very creative with some of the programs that we've come up with.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I mean, just look at the two of you. We don't have staff that need to be pushed. For the most part, we have teammates who've grown up with this competitive mindset. And what does it look like to be competitively excellent in everything that they're doing? What does it look like to really push to the edge of what you're capable of doing and beyond? So for us, it's not so much push you into it's as God opens up doors, which ones are the right doors for right now? We want to do everything, but one person said that the power of your yes is determined by the frequency of your no. Now, I don't want to say no to everything. I don't want to say no to, but there are certain things we can't do yet because we're not positioned as we grow. But when God gives us the green light, yeah, man, we have to go. And if it's from the position I'm in, if it's me saying, Chenzo, go do this, Justin, go do that. Now, that's how do I know better than you for your area, right? That's not the way that we should operate this ministry. If God's called you to the role, if He's called you to oversee an area, then we need to trust that. And where Amber or I or the RDs come in is just to support and to help to guide some of the decision making.
Yeah. And so obviously, you being one of the first few staff here in the Northeast, you've either been part of hands-on or you've heard a lot about everything that's kind of gone on, all the different huddles and camps and events and all those types of things. So outside of me and Justin coming on staff, what are some of your favorite memories from FCA?
Well, you took out the top two there, so now I have to go down the list. Man, I mean, this is tougher than the Olympics question because I've seen God do thousands of miracles, thousands of people that I've watched their lives transformed. I often think about it as FCA staff, even as FCA volunteers, we get a front row seat to watch God work. That's I hope I never get over that. We're literally, it's like the best seat in the house. We get to watch God work and operate. And I've seen it over and over. I've had an opportunity now to minister in multiple countries and continents and all over the North. But that's a long way of giving me time to think about my answer. I'll go back to one of my first experiences because it hasn't changed and it never gets old. One of my first experiences in FCA as a staff person, as a standout, we had a lacrosse camp. We had, let's say, 55 kids at this lacrosse camp, and my very first camp, I was the camp speaker, and I think I was overseeing coaches ministry and huddle minute, whatever. We were doing it, and I remember getting up and saying, Lord, I don't know, these kids, who knows what you want to do. I know I didn't have a great expectation necessarily of how I could connect with these campers. But I just said, Lord, whatever you want to do, go ahead and have your way. And one of the last nights, shared the gospel, gave an invitation, and almost the entire room stood up and came forward, including some coaches who were there to experience this with their sons, which was great. They were just helping out, because they were lacrosse coaches, but they wanted to see what this looked like. And I'll never forget looking on the right side and seeing this camper giving his life to Jesus, and looking over on the left side and seeing his dad give his life to Jesus, along with the entire room. And it was a powerful experience for me, not just because I got to actually be face to face with these kids and with these these dads, but I got to see God work, and that really set in motion for me this belief that God was a part of this. He was the one that was allowing us to have any fruit whatsoever in the Northeast, and no matter what anybody says about the Northeast, I've seen God work here in the Northeast. I've seen things that people thought were impossible happen right here. I've seen lives get changed, and it helped. I think it was as much for me as anything else. It helped me to know that He was in this, and that all I had to do was to stay in line with Him.
Hmm. That's such a powerful story, and I think such a massive, excuse me, a massive blessing of the work that we get to do. I mean, you're at a lacrosse camp, which everyone sports is cool, but then the reason we're there is so people could understand and come to meet Jesus.
That's
And
right.
like that's what it was 15 years ago, 50 years ago when FCA started. But looking forward now, looking ahead in the Northeast region, what are some things that you see? What direction do you see the Northeast region kind of heading in the next 14, 15 years?
Yeah. Well, I see FCA always being just about Jesus.
Mm.
Disciples making disciples. People learning how to follow Jesus. And if we do that, if we stay faithful to that, if we teach people, and as we come alongside them, if we teach them that Jesus is their first resort, that the answers are found in the Word, they don't rely on us or you or any staff about, but if we can teach them to go to Him, then sky's the limit. And where we do that is the part that will change. Where we do that will increase. Where we have ministry impact will continue to grow. The places where we get to do that, whether they be FCA facilities or in those schools, on those campgrounds, wherever it is, will hold true to who we are. And then as the ministry grows, what I see is more staff, more volunteers, more people being a part of it. And that's as I get older and older, as I've been in here, for as long as I have, there came a point for me where watching God operate through others, and I've seen God do incredible things through what you two do. Uh, Even though you're my two favorite things that have ever happened in FCA, like Chenzo said, but I've seen God work through people, and at some point a few years ago, that became more impactful for me to see how God continues to operate through staff, through volunteers, through coaches, through athletes, not us, not me, but watching that next generation really take off and do things that I never even dreamed were possible. That's the most fun part for me right now, being a part of this team.
Hmm. So I know we talked about, or you mentioned a little bit earlier, how we try to see things more as opportunities, not necessarily challenges, right? But as we grow and we go forward and the ministry is growing, there's obviously going to be obstacles that we face. There's also going to be a ton of open doors that we're able to just step through, right? Because God is amazing in those ways. But
Yeah.
from what you've seen, what are some of the struggles that our staff has faced here in the Northeast? But and then to counteract that, what are some of the strengths that you see because we're in the Northeast?
Yeah, it's a great question. Some of the struggles, society is not getting any more inviting
Mm.
to faith-based organizations. We know that. That's not a surprise. It's just a reality. I believe that the way that we respond to that, the way that we minister in light of that, in spite of that, in some ways, will continue to be excellent. Really, if I had to pinpoint a challenge, the ministry has grown faster than the network of support for the ministry. Our huddle ministry, we have well over 300 huddles going on throughout the Northeast, just in these campus huddles. So the challenge is, how do we continue to see the growth that God has allowed us to have? How do we see more and more disciples, more and more coaches and athletes who are going beyond themselves, who are starting to minister to other coaches and athletes? How do we see that happen and support the ministry well? How do we invite more people to volunteer? How do we invite more people to become financial partners with the ministry? That's really the challenge. We're limited in who we know to support this, because our staff are so proactive in growing the ministry. So I think that's one of the challenges. How do we make sure that we support the growth well?
Yeah, and that is a unique challenge that I know from experience, we all have been there. We're working through that now. But for those listeners who are hearing this maybe for the first time, or maybe they've been listening for a while and God's kind of moving in their hearts to get involved, Nathan, what are some of the best ways that you can give them to help them get involved with FCA's mission here in the Northeast?
Yeah. Well, I truly believe that there's a role for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
If God's tapping you on the heart to get involved, there's a role. We just have to find the right role. We don't want to put someone in the wrong space, the wrong seat for what God's calling them to do. And I don't care what the role is. It's really not about, well, I've got this role and you've got that role, and he or she has a different role. It's what is God's role for every individual. So we have people who will be involved because they're coaches, they're student leaders, and God's put it on their hearts to be involved. We have others who they want to become board members, and they want to strategically increase the capacity of a local area here in the Northeast. We have some who say, I can't do those things. I don't have the bandwidth or the time to spend at the huddle or to volunteer, but I want to partner with you financially. I want to make sure that you have the resources to be able to minister to these coaches and athletes, these teams and communities that we have. So there's a role for everybody that wants to be in the team. We just have to find the right role for every individual. And that's best done through a conversation with local staff, because as I said, that local area is best, and how somebody can get involved to have that impact that God's had on their heart to have.
Yeah, I know one of the things that comes up pretty often when I've interviewed people for positions here in the Hudson Valley, maybe they're kind of questioning if they really are called to staff and things like that, and they're still feeling pretty strong about being involved with FCA, and sometimes at least the initial interview, that just shows us like, hey, this person wants to be invested in FCA, but maybe staff isn't right for them. So FCA might be right, it just might not be for that person. So maybe you guys that are listening, maybe you have felt a call into full-time occupational ministry, and that's great. Or for some people, that's not where God's calling us, and that's perfectly okay too, because our ministry relies pretty much very heavily on our volunteers. Right, a lot of the programs that we run, the huddles that we do, the camps that we run, they're all run because we have volunteers that are willing to give us their time and resources and energy to put those things together. So, I mean, I know for me, there's been camps, like we did a wrestling camp last year. I know nothing about wrestling, so I was like the night before, I'm trying to Google like how like scoring works and all stuff. But like I delegated that to the volunteers. I was completely volunteer led, and I just took their lead on it. So it didn't matter that I was technically the quote unquote director. It was just, hey, like let me help you find the places that you can best serve, and then let's put you in those positions. And I think that's a big thing for us as staff. And I think you guys would probably agree. Like we want to help people live out their calling, and so for us, it's plugging them into places that we know we have the need for, and we see their strengths being able to, oh, Joey, you fit here, Sarah, you fit over there. Is this something that you'd be interested in? And then that's where we see huddles growing at some of our college campuses and high school campuses that, they're needing to fit into a gymnasium because they can't fit into a classroom anymore.
Yeah, man. That's what that is. That's what it's all about. We get to help people be positioned to fulfill God's call in their life and to see God's glory manifested through them. That's really, again, going back to it, what does it look like to live as an act of worship? So we can do this as an act of worship and help others do the same.
Yeah. Pretty neat too that we get to like talk about the Super Bowl at the same time while we do all this stuff.
Hey, if the Bills or the Patriots start winning again, maybe we could send people to the Super Bowl. Who knows?
Well, you forgot to mention the Jets in there, but I'll let that one slide.
I didn't forget the Jets or my team, the Giants.
That's not a forgot.
I didn't forget either one of them.
All right, so as we kind of wrap this episode up, Nathan, if you could leave the audience with one key thing that you would want them to know about FCA, what would that be?
Well, the key thing is it's all about Jesus. That's who we are. That's FCA started 1954 with Don McClannon, making sure that we were all about Jesus. That has never changed. So if we can, as long as we keep him first and foremost, and we position this ministry to glorify him, then we're never turning back. Because I've watched God do things through FCA in the Northeast that nobody thought was possible. Nobody, including former staff, nobody thought this was possible. But here we are. So there's a role for everybody that wants to get involved. But just know when you step into FCA, you're stepping into a ministry that takes Jesus really seriously.
That's powerful. And that should always be the focus, as that's what the ministry started on. So just, in listening to your story and just hearing all the things you shared from coming on staff in 2011 and then stepping into this regional vice president position in 2020, it's just been amazing to hear how God continually, God's the hero of every story you've shared. It's never been about, the staff, it's never been about you. It's just been about all the things that God has been able to do in the Northeast through people who are surrendered to him in the mission of, what he's calling them in to do. So I just, and just blown away by where FCA has come here in the Northeast, and I'm excited to see where it's going to go. And it sounds like, what is, I guess my last kind of thought is, in terms of leadership, as someone who is under your leadership, you're a leader who leads from out front. And what is your thought of, leadership in general in that capacity? Like, what does a good leader look like to you? Because I think you are a good leader.
Oh, I appreciate that.
And I'm not sucking up. That's not sucking up either.
I think a good leader, I hope this doesn't sound cliche because this is my heart. A good leader looks like Jesus, right? Paul said, imitate me as I imitate him. God has helped me to know who I am, what gifts he's given me, how he's wired me. And I believe if I'm faithful to that, not leading like somebody else. Somebody else is gifted totally differently. And there are times I look at other people and go, wow, that's incredible. That's a leader. But the reality is if we all recognize who God has wired us to be, how he's wired us to lead or to serve, and we do it that way and we're comfortable with that, then that's the way that it's going to work best. I'm a shepherd. God's called me to be a shepherd. He hasn't called me to be somebody else. We have amazing leaders in FCA, but they're not all the same. But hopefully, prayerfully, all the leaders in FCA are leading from the place that God's called them to lead, from the giftings that God's given them.
I can say too, when I came on, I was hired by Dave Parks, who was our state director at the time, and very shortly after I came on staff, right, he moved on to the national level, and then we had Amber come on as our state director, and I remember thinking like, man, like how are we going to move on from like Dave Parks, right? Like how are we going to move on from that leadership style, right? Dave was very like, put your head down, like let's go, not taking no for an answer, and now Amber has a very different leadership style, but it's exactly what we needed when we needed it. And I think that's the important part of leadership is you don't need clones of people, right? Because at that point, then there's no creativity, nothing different is happening. But I think this goes not just for FCA, but just in general, like the leadership, like you need different people, you need different perspectives, you need different thoughts, you need people that are going to do things a little bit differently. And I think I truly think, man, I know I'm sure I'm being biased, but I do think our leadership in FCA from the New York to the Northeast to nationally to globally, like I think we have incredible leaders. I really do. And what I really appreciate about our leadership is that they really do listen to the people on the ground. Like they're not always making decisions just based on what they think. Like they're really leaning into us and our volunteers even, and like the students. Like some of our students and volunteers have created programs that now are like staples within FCA. Like that doesn't just happen in the corporate world.
Yeah, no, it's 100%. And I mean, look at our president and CEO, Shane Williamson. We have a staff of 3,100 people. Shane started out in FCA as an area rep. He's a coach who became an area rep, who became an area director, and has served in every capacity that you can imagine in FCA. So our leaders' DNA is really from the field. That's who we are as a ministry. And as long as we don't lose sight of that, and there'll be times when we don't understand certain things, or I don't have big picture, but as long as the DNA of our organization is Jesus first and really lead from the field, then we'll be fine. Yeah. Plus we have, I mean, you've got the coolest name in the Northeast, Vincenzo. Justin, you've got, I mean, nobody will get into an arm wrestling match with you. We have some of the best studs right here helping us to get the word out. So yeah, we're good to go as long as God keeps calling some great men and women to this team. Well, we'll be fine.
Yeah. Well, I hope this episode was helpful for some of our listeners just to get an inside look at FCA here in the Northeast, but in general. We share a lot of what we get to do in FCA, but we really want you to see like what's the heart behind that? How is this growing? What has God really done? Because it's easy to see what's right in front of us, but sometimes we forget to look back and see where God started us and where He's leading us to go. So, thank you for your time today, Nathan, and just want to encourage our listeners, if you are looking to get involved with FCA or would like to learn more information, you can go on to northeastfca.org and then click on your state, and you'll get connected with the leaders there. We'd love to have these conversations with you. We'd love to learn more about you. We'd love to learn where we can serve you and your teams and your communities, because as we said, this ministry is growing. God's doing amazing things through it, but He's doing things through just everybody involved. It's not just the staff that are doing these things. It's our volunteers, it's our students, it's our donors, it's our board members, and we'd love to see how God can place you into this ministry too. So check that out. But yeah, Nathan, thank you for your time again today. We appreciate you jumping on and sharing with our listeners.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor. Appreciate you.
All right,
Thank
guys.
you so much.
Thank you guys, and we'll see you all next week.